The views expressed are not those of local community broadcasting, WYML LP, or its management, volunteers, or underwriters. Greetings and welcome to the Personal Safety Show. This is Marcus Melnick from Firearm Mentor and Stress to Logic, your host. And on today's episode, I have Seth Cohen, who is running for federal United States representative in the 9th District. Seth, welcome to the show.
Hi, Marcus. Thank you for having me.
Can you tell everyone a little bit about you? What's your origin story and what are you running for, which we already said, and why are you running?
Yeah, thank you so much for the question. And I just want to start off that all of these, my thoughts and stuff are really my own. I didn't prepare anything. So if they seem a little bit of like I'm rambling, that's because I am, because I'm thinking about the answer on the spot, trying to get a good answer. But to answer your question, again, thank you for asking. So I grew up in Buffalo Grove, in the north suburbs of Chicago, single-parent household. My mom couldn't find the right husband, and so she had twins, me and my sister. I grew up in a big judo family. My uncles were Olympians in judo, and my cousins were highly ranked and really high-level competitors. But I am a horrible athlete, which is what I like to tell people when they ask about it. And a biggest part of my youth was being on the wrestling team. And so wrestling really drove me to be the man that I am growing up without a father. It took my head coach, Coach Cook, and my other coaches, Coach Ortman, Coach Martinez, to really turn me into the man that I am today, in addition to the Marine Corps, which I'm sure we'll get into later. And so at 19 years old, after graduating high school, I joined the Marine Corps. I was stationed in Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, with 2nd Tank Battalion as a radio operator. And the 4 years that I served in the Marine Corps are the most formative of my life. It really, with the addition of wrestling, really drove me to be the man that I am today. And everything that I've accomplished since, I wholly attribute to the United States Marine Corps.
That is fantastic. Hoorah, as they say. Did you know that if you went to Camp Lejeune, you may be entitled to compensation? Okay, I'm teasing. It's all over the news and media, and I keep getting these pop-ups on Facebook and TikTok. So finally, I met someone who actually went to Camp Lejeune. Well, we thank you for your service. I'm extremely patriotic, as you are. And can you, I'm going to segue a little bit. Can you tell us about your family?
Yeah, I'd love to. So 3 of us really growing up. My great-grandparents came from mostly Russia and Poland. Went through Ellis Island, and then got hopped on a train and went right to Chicago. So for 4 generations, my family's been in Chicago, which has been absolutely fantastic. Again, my whole family lives within 10 miles or 20 miles of where I live. So we've all been very close and really together. And so my mom had 2 brothers. Both were judoka Olympians. They grew up in West Rogers Park. And they've hence went to the north suburbs, but the roots was originally in West Rogers Park. And so my mom taught for the Special Education District of Lake County for over 30 years in special education, which was, again, a very formative part of my life, going to her classroom, interacting with her students, seeing her come home from work every day, exhausted, sometimes with scratches and bite marks. So my mom is a true hero in the educational world.
She absolutely is. I worked in special ed for about 1.5 years and same experience. Come home with bites and scratches and bruises and all that good stuff. I totally cut you off. Please continue.
Without a father, I was really a wild child. I never got in trouble with the law. I never got in trouble with any. In school, actually in school, let me rephrase. In school, I actually got in trouble a lot. A lot of detentions, a lot of going to the principal's office. I was the usual suspect. But I didn't really have, I had wrestling, and the coaches really did a lot to turn me into a man. But I didn't really have a father figure. My mom was so tired and so into her work. She was raising 2 kids on her own on a teacher salary in Buffalo Grove in the Stevenson district, where real estate taxes are extremely high. And so it was really hard for her. She did a phenomenal job with what she had. And my sister and I are, to sound hubristic or narcissistic, but I think she did a really good job raising us. And so my childhood was a lot of, in the summers, riding bikes around the neighborhood and playing football with friends and doing anything but doing my homework. Great childhood. But when I got the opportunity to leave and join the Marine Corps, I took that opportunity, and growing up in my end of my teenage years, early 20s, with people from all over the country, and having staff sergeants and gunnery sergeants that were in Iraq and Afghanistan, who've seen war and have been in the military for over a decade, and having them really have the legal power to shape me into a man in a way that natural society you can't do without a father. Again, really, it's like the driving force of who I am today.
Very good. And so I'm on your website, which is Seth Allen Cohen, and I'll spell that later, .com. And it also says you went to UFC, University of Chicago, which is quite impressive. So why would such a smart Jewish boy who's got accepted to the University of Chicago go into the Marine Corps?
Yeah, that's a great question. I graduated high school with a very poor GPA. Again, I did everything but my homework, and I didn't really see a lot of value in education. My family members didn't really go to college. I think I had 2 cousins that had college degrees. My mom actually has 2 master's degrees. But my uncles were highly successful. My aunts, most of my cousins, because they were in the judo world. So I don't think I really saw the value in a college education, so I didn't work hard in high school. When I was in the Marine Corps, there was a mentor of mine. His name's Josu Rodriguez, and he actually just commissioned in the Marine Corps. But at the time, we were corporals together, and lance corporals, and he was working his tail off to go to the University of Southern California, just his tail off. He was doing a full community college course load while he was on active duty, which very few people are able to do.
Wow, that's impressive. What was your major in college?
But going back to that story.
Oh, sorry.
No, not at all. So seeing him and the work ethic that he was doing and putting in, it really drove me to really work really hard. And so he really took me under his wing and made sure that I enrolled in community college and that I was getting good grades. And so I learned the value of education while I was in the Marine Corps, because I strived to be a commissioned officer. And so the people that I looked up to were Naval Academy grads, West Point grads. Actually, my biggest mentor out of the Marine Corps is a West Point grad, which is kind of ironic because usually West Point grads go to the Army. And so
I wanted
to commission in the Marine Corps. That was my main goal. And so I wanted to go to Northwestern University. Northwestern University told me, no, under no circumstances will we take you. And then the University of Chicago said, we want you. And so I got into the University of Chicago, and I studied economics there.
Very good. And I'm sure that plays into your desire to run for office as well, correct?
I wanted to run for office for a very long time. And so I didn't realize or even think that I was going to run this early. I really wanted a successful business career. I really wanted to be involved in the capitalist society that we're in, like build value for people, employ people, really understand how the different economic factors factor into everyday life and into the business world. But I have a baby. I have a 4-month-old daughter, Annie. Seeing the world that she's going to grow up in, seeing the path of the Democrat Party and where legislative politics is going and executive politics. And I purposely keep out the judicial branch because I think the judicial branch is doing a phenomenal job at the Supreme Court level. I just had to get involved, especially when I saw that no one was running against Jan Schakowsky. And I think Jan, and we'll get into this later, I think Jan has just been horrible for this country. I think she's been horrible for the district. And so given the opportunity, looking at my daughter in her face and realizing that the America she's going to grow up in is going to be vastly worse than the America I grew up in, which in turn was also worse than the America that my mother grew up in, that I just had to get involved at an early age.
Very good. Were you, I know I'm going to be jumping around a little bit here. Were you religious growing up?
No, not at all. So I actually come from a very secular Jewish background. My uncles are very proud of the Jewish heritage. My mother is very proud of her Jewish heritage. And so we were a part of a Temple Chai in Buffalo Grove.
Yep.
Again, single parent household. My mom could not afford. So if you go to an Orthodox synagogue, I think the usual gist is you pay what you can, but they'd rather you be there. I don't want to generalize all Reform synagogues, but part of it's a business. I'm not saying that the community isn't great. I'm not saying that kids don't learn and that they don't gain a Jewish heritage there, but part of it's a business. And they were very Did not want to give my mom a break. Again, special ed teacher, single parent household, single salary, single income. And so we couldn't afford it. And so we actually left before I became bar mitzvah, and my mom couldn't afford for me to get bar mitzvah. So grew up very non-religious. And as I was in high school and I started to become farther and farther away from religion, and by religion, I don't mean God. I don't think God was really ever in the picture of my childhood. I mean, just like secular Jewish holidays, meaning we celebrate Passover, but we don't really talk about God, or Hanukkah, same thing. God was never really in the picture. But I was so far removed from those holidays and knowing anything about them that I think when I matured a little bit in high school, in my late junior, senior year, I wanted to understand more about Judaism, really go back to my roots. And I remember rapping to Tefillin for the first time in the Chabad house of Buffalo Grove, off of, I think, Activistic Road.
Right.
And that really was eye-opening for me. And then eventually I went to Bay Shul at Buffalo Grove under Rabbi Grunberg. And that was the start of being a Baal Tshuva and becoming a modern Orthodox Jew.
Very good, very good. I saw that, and it was very interesting to me that your high school was Stevenson, not Ida Crown, or So that I was like, oh, he must have become religious at some point. So that's why I'm asking that. Can you talk about your philosophy of values over politics?
I live and breathe politics. I'm on YouTube every day, but I'm not watching cat videos. I'm watching the Wall Street Journal or Breaking Points or other news media, political media. But I'm just so sick of politics in a way that I think every American is. And I'm not interested in politics. I'm interested in statesmanship. I'm interested in helping out my fellow Americans, making a better world for our children and grandchildren. So when you ask me like values over politics, like values is infinity and politics is zero, for me. And so I'm not afraid to like win an election and then lose it the next time around because I did the right thing. Yeah, I'm not interested in making the party feel better. I'm not interested in voting in lockstep. I'm not interested in politics. I'll tell you something that's really been grinding my gears recently is this whole rhino terminology that I hear in the Republican Party. And I'm a very conservative person. I don't think I'll get into every crevice and corner of my conservatism, but I'm a very conservative person. And I was actually called a rhino for a long time for just obtuse reasons. It's like, I'm just sick of this whole rhino terminology because the rhino terminology isn't a value. It's politics. It's either you agree with me or you don't. And if you don't agree with every single part of my Republican platform, then you're a rhino. Rhino meaning Republican in name only. And so I just don't care about that. I just care about building a better future. And so again, I don't want to ramble, but I just want to reiterate one last time, is that if I win my congressional district, which I certainly think I will, if I work with Democrats to get amazing things done, because the only way we're going to get out of this crazy country that we're in right now is through bipartisan cooperation, and Republicans don't like that, and I lose, fine. I don't care about that. I don't care about winning elections like my opponent who's been in office since the 20th century. I don't care about that. I care about doing the right thing and making as much difference as I can for my community.
Sounds to me like you are the epitome of an independent thinker. And there are people out there who are committed to whatever their party says. I'm a Democrat, therefore XYZ. I'm a Republican, therefore XYZ. I classify myself as an independent because some things I run conservative on, some things I run a little bit more liberal on. And that's just based on my upbringing. I don't fit into a nice little category, and it sounds like you don't either, which is absolutely full of integrity, and I have a ton of respect for that. With that,
I appreciate that, Mark. I'll tell you, I actually grew up a Democrat. My mother was in the teachers union.
Right.
My school pushed Democrat principles. My mom's friends were all teachers, and so I grew up a Democrat. And I remember when I joined the Marine Corps, I came with Democrat values. I remember the first time I shot a gun, and it felt really wrong. And someone asked me, like, "You're in the Marine Corps. It's a gun club. Like, what are you doing if you don't like guns?" And I was like, I want to serve my country. Like I want to be here. I want to do the right thing. I want to be a United States Marine. And it took 4 years of getting rid of that conditioning and surrounding myself with people from all over the country with all different values, all different upbringings, from the poorest to the richest, to the most educated to the least educated, with different cultures and diverse backgrounds, to finally come up with this realization that, wow, I've been duped. I was duped as a kid. And Ronald Reagan was a Democrat when he was a young man. He was in Hollywood. Donald Trump was a Democrat before he was a Republican. And so I really appreciate you saying that it sounds like I'm an independent thinker. And I think that my U Chicago education really helped. My time in the Marine Corps was really the epitome, again, of who I am. And so I'm definitely an independent thinker. I definitely try to apply critical thinking, but I've totally 180'd all of my views because I evolved. And I feel like most people don't evolve politically. They stay in their bubble. They stay in their little group. I just marched in the Evanston Parade for 4th of July yesterday, which I kind of knew I was entering the Lion's Den, but I really enjoyed it. Listen, I'm a Marine. I want to be in the Lion's Den. And you can just tell, I don't want to generalize. But I'm going to generalize. You can tell that people have been in their bubble for a very long time. And so when they see Jan Schakowsky, they see someone who they think shares their values and is really making the country a better place. And she's just not. And they haven't evolved, even if they're in their 60s, 70s, or 80s. They haven't evolved over their life because they haven't left their current life. And so I've very much evolved in my short 27 years. And I definitely try to apply critical thinking. And I'm not afraid to admit I'm wrong, which I think a lot of people are. I'm not afraid to admit that I was wrong. I was wrong on gun rights issues, when I was a kid. I was wrong on taxes. I was wrong on a lot of stuff. And I'm not afraid to admit I'm wrong because I want to be on the right page. It's not about being right from the beginning. It's about evolving as a person. And I wish more Americans and politicians would evolve over time.
I've got 2 questions for you. When did you get mugged? Okay, so you get that. Thank you. I'm going to explain to the readers. They say that a Democrat is really a Republican who hasn't been mugged yet. And it's just a joke. So don't get all up in arms, everyone. I'm just trying to be funny. And then the second question I have is, with you being, at least at the beginning in the Marine Corps, a little bit skittish or uncomfortable about firearms, is that why they assigned you to the radio?
No.
Okay, I'm teasing you. It's not a serious question.
There's actually a great story about that. I want to tell you.
Sure.
I originally wanted to be infantry, and my mom came into the recruiting station and said my son will be infantry because, people think that if you're in the infantry, you're going to go off to war, even though no war was really happening when I joined in 2016. There was very little fighting, and SOCOM was doing the vast majority of fighting. SOCOM means Special Operations Command, which consists of the SEALs, MARSOC, which is the Marine equivalent to the SEALs, Green Berets, etc. So SOCOM was doing all the fighting in 16, but who knows that when you're a 19-year-old boy trying to sign your name on the dotted line. And so my mom was talking to the recruiter, I don't want my son to be infantry. And he looked at me and he said, there's a $5,000 bonus to be a radio operator. Oh. And I was like really hard because I wanted to be infantry. But listen, $5,000, make my mom happy. She supports me joining. It was an easy decision at the end of the day.
Terrific.
So that's why I was a radio operator.
Terrific. Back to the current campaign. What are some of the issues that you are passionate about that are in your wheelhouse that you really think we need to move forward on?
I love that question. And so, again, going back to what I originally stated, I'm going to ramble a little bit because I didn't prepare on purpose because I want to be organic in my answers. I think the number one thing that's really important to me is federalism. And I think that post World War II, post FDR, Lyndon B. Johnson, another president whose name is escaping me right now, during World War I, he was
Hoover?
He was the dean of Princeton. He was the president of Princeton. Yeah, I can't remember his name right now. But those 3 presidents really changed the view of the country, the relationship between the states and the federal government. They expanded federal government. Woodrow Wilson, that's his name, Woodrow Wilson. They've expanded government so much that this idea of federalism really faded. And so it still exists, But just look at today. Everyone knows who's running for president. I would bet half the district knows who's running for Congress. I would bet a tenth of the district knows who's running for their state rep or their county judge or whatever. And so you go back into the day, and the president was important, but people really understood their local officials and who they were. And this really doesn't exist to a large extent today. And so what's the repercussion? The repercussion is that 435 people in D.C. plus the president determines the policy for the whole country. And so I'm really interested in government shrinking, people getting more power at the state and local level. I'm in Illinois, mostly because my wife wants to stay in Illinois. I think Illinois is going the way of California in terms of being a failed state. I really mean that. Look at our pension system, look at our crime, look at corporations leaving, look at our uni-party state in terms of there's no challengers to the Democrat Party. I think J.B. Pritzker is doing a horrible job as governor. And to be fair, I didn't think he did such a horrible job during COVID, but I think in the aggregate, in his policies, he's really destroying this country. But even still, I would rather be the governor and the state legislator than the Congress. And I think American people need to get rid of their high-level view of the country, and they need to shrink. And the federal government needs to say, our goal isn't to be masters over the country. Our goal is to do what the Constitution wants us to do and let the 10th Amendment dictate the rest. And so I'm really passionate about federalism. And so as a congressman, I'm not going to overreach because I want the states and the local governments to determine their own paths. Another thing that's really important to me is making elections fair. And I don't mean that in the Trumpian sense. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking mostly about gerrymandering and the power of incumbents and term limits. So gerrymandering is really the worst bug of the Constitution. It is just a horrendous oversight by the founders of our nation. The state legislator, it makes sense to think, okay, the state legislator determines where the districts are and then the outline of the districts. But it has made politics so toxic because they draw the districts in a way where people stay in Congress for life. Like Nancy Pelosi. I mean, listen, San Francisco is a very, very liberal city. But still, every district should be competitive. You shouldn't just, you won your race in the primary, and so you're automatically the congressman. And then because of the power of incumbents, meaning that incumbents have the national party and the state party on their side, and they have name recognition because they're on TV all the time, and they send out letters using the power of the government. Just the combination of the two makes it impossible for new blood to come in. And so what do? You have career politicians. And so gerrymandering and the power of incumbents has really created career politicians. This third thing I'll hit on really quickly is term limits. And so I'm not running for Congress because I want to have a 25-year career in Congress like Nancy Pelosi or Chuck Schumer, or let's put some Republicans in there. What's his name? Chuck Grassley has been in power for forever. Senator Lindsey Graham has been in power forever. And so these guys shouldn't just automatically stay in power. And I think they need term limits. And so I advocate for 5-term term limits for congressmen, 5 or 10. I think I can go either way, either 10 or 20 years. But I think after 20 years, I think it's time for you to leave. And then for senators, you should get 3 terms after 18 years. You need to go. You need to go do something else. You served your country. Thank you for your service. And you got to get out of there. And so for me, in Congress, of course, inflation, immigration, Israel, anti-Semitism, a whole plethora of issues. But if I can achieve anything in Congress, term limits and getting rid of gerrymandering is definitely at the top of that list.
So let me dovetail on what you said. And I looked at the 9th Congressional District, and it looks really like I drew it with my left hand with a crayon. I mean, that's what it looks like. So what really blows my mind, and maybe this is just my soapbox, is that the 9th Congressional District specifically covers Cook Lake and McHenry counties, parts of Chicago, parts of Evanston, Skokie, Glenview, Buffalo Grove, Mundelein, Crystal Lake, Cary. How are the issues in Crystal Lake, Illinois affecting, and this is a rhetorical question, the issues that are in Skokie and Evanston? It's two different cultures. One is more urban, one is more suburban. So it's a rhetorical comment that I think gerrymandering, agree with you, is completely ridiculous.
I just want to say, Marcus,
go ahead.
I don't mind losing elections. Like, if the elections were fair, if there was a plus one or plus two margin in terms of how they draw the map for Republicans or Democrats, I don't care if the Republican loses 10 terms in a row, 10 elections in a row, if it's fair. Right. If they draw the map where anyone can win, not just one party or the other party if they throw $50 million into the race, if they're fortunate enough to have that kind of dough on them. And so, like, again, I don't care about the outcome. I care about the election in terms of how fair it is in terms of gerrymandering. So if Jan Schakowsky won those last 13 terms fair and square, meaning that the gerrymandering wasn't favoring her, it was just an even district, that's fine. That's totally fine. But that's not what's taking place. Not at all. And to answer your rhetorical question, which obviously it's rhetorical, but I really want to pretend it's not and answer it, I think you should go south because it goes to uptown Chicago, which is basically Lakeview. It's like almost Lakeview. So what does uptown Chicago have to do with Algonquin or Crystal Lake or Cary? Absolutely nothing. Those people have absolutely nothing in common, except maybe they both smoke weed. But other than that, they have nothing in common. And so, like, what are we doing here? Like, if you know what we're doing here, it's all about power. It's just all about power. And so we like to pretend that we're in this great republic with representative democracy. And literally we are, but not in the spirit of it. I mean, literally, yes, we elect a representative, and that representative represents us in Congress. But at the end of the day, that's really what's happening, but that's not really what's happening. Because Springfield, through gerrymandering the districts, determines who Illinois sends to the Congress. And it's horrible. And it's all about power. And it has nothing to do with your children or your grandchildren. It has nothing to do with future generations or making the country a better place or more democratic. It has everything to do with power. And it's just so disgusting, Marcus. It's just so disgusting. And it just makes me want to vomit all the time. I mean, it really does. It's nauseating.
The views expressed are not those of local community broadcasting, WYML LP, or its management, volunteers, or underwriters.